A 10-year-old girl pays a poor man's train ticket. The next day a luxury car was waiting. Have you ever wondered how a simple act of kindness can change a life forever? Meet Emma, a compassionate 10-year-old girl with a heart of gold. At a bustling train station, she encounters Mr. Jenkins, an elderly man in distress, unable to pay for his ticket. Emma's selfless gesture to buy his ticket sets off an incredible chain of events. The very next day, a luxury car appears at her doorstep. But that's just the beginning. Discover how Emma's small act of generosity leads to an unexpected and life-changing reward. From heartfelt connections to life-altering surprises, this story will warm your heart and restore your faith in humanity. Emma clutched her worn teddy bear, its frayed ears comforting in her small hands, as the train hissed to a stop at the bustling station. The cacophony of hurried footsteps, distant announcements, and the clattering of wheels against the concrete filled the air. The 10-year-old's eyes were wide with wonder, taking in the chaotic beauty of the place. Her excitement was palpable. Today, she was on her way to visit her grandmother in a quaint, picturesque town a few hours away. As Emma stood on her tiptoes to peek over the crowd, her gaze landed on an elderly man by the ticket booth. He looked lost, fumbling through his empty pockets with a look of distress etched on his face. His clothes were old and worn, but he carried himself with a certain dignity. His gentle eyes, framed by a network of wrinkles, spoke of a lifetime of stories, some joyful, some undoubtedly sorrowful. Emma's heart ached for him. She had always been a compassionate child, her empathy far exceeding her years. She tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mom, that man looks like he needs help." Her mother, busy ensuring they had all their belongings, glanced briefly at the old man but was too preoccupied to notice the depth of his plight. "Just stay close, Emma. We don't want to miss our train." But Emma couldn't ignore the man's predicament. With a determined look, she slipped away from her mother's side and approached him. He was now talking to the ticket agent, who shook his head sympathetically. "I'm sorry, sir, but without the full fare, I can't issue you a ticket," the agent said. The old man sighed heavily, his shoulders slumping. Emma stepped closer, her small voice piping up, "Excuse me, sir. Do you need help with your ticket?" The old man turned, surprised to see the little girl standing there, her teddy bear clutched tightly under her arm. "Oh, hello there, young lady. I'm afraid I seem to have misplaced my money. I was hoping to visit my brother, but it seems luck isn't on my side today." Emma's eyes sparkled with determination. "I have some money saved up. I can pay for your ticket." The old man's eyes widened in astonishment. "That's very kind of you, but I couldn't possibly accept." Emma shook her head, her voice firm. "I want to help. Please, let me." With a mixture of gratitude and reluctance, the old man nodded. Emma reached into her small backpack, pulling out her purse. It was a small, pink thing, adorned with stickers and glitter, filled with coins and crumpled bills she'd saved from her allowance. She handed the money to the ticket agent. "One ticket for him, please." The agent smiled warmly, touched by the girl's generosity, and issued the ticket. The old man accepted it with trembling hands, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, young lady. You have a heart of gold." Emma beamed. "You're welcome. What's your name?" The old man smiled gently. "My name is Mr. Jenkins." "And what's your name, kind soul?" "Emma," she replied brightly. "I'm going to visit my grandma." "Where are you going?" Mr. Jenkins' eyes softened. "I'm going to visit my brother. It's been a long time since I've seen him." Together, they made their way to the platform, Emma's mother finally noticing her daughter's absence and rushing over. She opened her mouth to scold, but Mr. Jenkins intervened. "Your daughter just did a wonderful thing, ma'am," he explained, recounting the story. Emma's mother's expression softened, pride replacing her initial worry. As they boarded the train, Emma and Mr. Jenkins found seats across from each other. The rhythmic clattering of the train on the tracks provided a soothing backdrop to their conversation. "So, Mr. Jenkins," Emma began, her curiosity piqued. Where did you grow up? Mr. Jenkins smiled, reminiscing. I grew up in a small town not far from here. It was a beautiful place, full of green fields and friendly faces. I used to play in the orchards with my brothers, climbing trees and chasing butterflies. Emma's eyes widened. That sounds like so much fun. What did you do when you got older? The old man's smile faltered slightly. I became a teacher. I loved sharing knowledge and inspiring young minds. But life has a way of throwing unexpected challenges our way. I faced some difficult times and eventually had to leave my job. Emma sensed the sadness in his voice. I'm sorry, Mr. Jenkins. That must have been hard. He nodded, a faraway look in his eyes. Yes, it was. But meeting kind people like you reminds me that there is still goodness in the world. They shared snacks, with Emma offering some of her homemade cookies, which Mr. Jenkins accepted gratefully. They laughed over silly stories, Emma's tales of school adventures and Mr. Jenkins' memories of his mischievous youth. Hours seemed to fly by in the warmth of their newfound friendship. Emma felt an almost magical connection with Mr. Jenkins, as if they had known each other for years instead of mere hours. The train finally began to slow as it approached their destination. Emma's heart sank at the thought of saying goodbye to her new friend. She looked out the window, trying to memorize every detail of the journey. As the train came to a stop, Emma and Mr. Jenkins stood, gathering their belongings. Mr. Jenkins reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, old coin. It was worn but had an intricate design etched into its surface. Emma, he said softly, pressing the coin into her hand. This coin brought me luck once. May it bring you luck too. Emma stared at the coin, feeling its weight in her palm. Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. I'll keep it safe. They stepped off the train, the platform a blur of activity. Emma's grandmother was waiting, her face lighting up as she spotted Emma. Mr. Jenkins waved, a wistful smile on his face. Promise me you'll keep being kind and brave, Emma, he said. I promise, Emma replied, her voice strong despite the lump in her throat. With a final wave, Mr. Jenkins disappeared into the crowd, leaving Emma with a sense of fulfillment and a heart full of hope. She knew their paths had crossed for a reason, and she would cherish the memory of this day forever. The train ride continued, its rhythmic clattering creating a soothing backdrop as the countryside rolled by in a blur of greens and golds. Emma sat across from Mr. Jenkins, her curiosity growing with each passing mile. She had always been a good listener, a quality her parents admired in her, and she felt a strong urge to know more about this kind old man whose life had intersected with hers so unexpectedly. Mr. Jenkins, Emma began, her voice filled with the earnestness only a child can muster. Can you tell me more about your family? You said you were visiting your brother. Mr. Jenkins smiled, a faraway look in his eyes. Yes, my brother, Thomas. We were very close growing up. Our parents own a small farm, and we spent our childhood exploring every inch of it. Thomas was always the adventurous one, climbing trees and getting into all sorts of mischief, while I was the quieter one, more content with a book under the shade of an old oak tree. Emma's eyes sparkled with interest. That sounds like fun. Did you get into trouble a lot? Mr. Jenkins chuckled softly. Oh, plenty of times. I remember once, Thomas convinced me to help him build a raft so we could float down the river that ran through our property. We worked on it for days, using whatever materials we could find. When we finally set it on the water, it fell apart within minutes, and we both ended up soaked and muddy. Our parents were not pleased, but we laughed about it for weeks. Emma giggled at the image of the two boys and their ill-fated raft. What did you do after that? Well, we learned our lesson about building rafts, Mr. Jenkins said with a smile. As we grew older, our paths diverged. Thomas stayed on the farm, helping our parents and eventually taking it over. I went to college and became a teacher. I always loved learning and wanted to share that passion with others. Emma nodded, her admiration for Mr. Jenkins growing. What did you teach? History, Mr. Jenkins replied. I loved bringing the past to life for my students, helping them see the stories and lessons that history holds. I always believed that understanding where we come from helps us navigate where we're going. That's really cool, Emma said, her voice full of genuine enthusiasm. I like history too. My teacher says it's like a big, long story that we're all a part of. Mr. Jenkins' eyes twinkled. Your teacher is very wise. History is indeed a grand story, and each of us has a part to play in it. As the train rolled on, they continued to share stories, their bond growing stronger with each passing moment. Mr. Jenkins recounted tales of his students, the joy he felt when they finally grasped a difficult concept, and the challenges he faced as a teacher. Emma listened intently, asking questions and sharing her own experiences in school. I have a best friend named Lily, Emma said at one point. We do everything together. She loves art and always draws the most amazing pictures. I'm not very good at drawing, but she says I have a great imagination. It sounds like you complement each other perfectly, Mr. Jenkins observed. Friendships like that are precious. They help us grow and see the world in new ways. Emma smiled, thinking of Lily and their countless adventures together. Yeah, we've been friends since kindergarten. I can't imagine school without her. Mr. Jenkins nodded. Cherish those friendships, Emma. They are among life's greatest treasures. The conversation shifted, and Emma found herself asking about the hardships Mr. Jenkins had mentioned earlier. You said you had to leave your job. What happened? Mr. Jenkins sighed, the lines on his face deepening with the weight of memory. Life has a way of throwing unexpected challenges our way. I love teaching, but a few years ago, I fell ill and had to take a leave of absence. The medical bills piled up, and despite my best efforts, I couldn't keep up. I lost my home and most of what I had. Emma's heart ached for him. I'm so sorry, Mr. Jenkins. That must have been really hard. It was, he admitted. But it also taught me the importance of kindness and resilience. I met so many wonderful people who helped me when I had nothing to give in return. It restored my faith in humanity. Emma reached out and squeezed his hand. You're a very strong person, Mr. Jenkins. He smiled, touched by her sincerity. Thank you, Emma. Strength comes in many forms, and sometimes, it's the smallest acts of kindness that give us the most strength. As the train continued its journey, they shared a quiet moment, watching the landscape change outside the window. Fields gave way to forests, and the sky shifted from a clear blue to the soft hues of approaching evening. The rhythmic motion of the train and the gentle hum of conversation created a peaceful atmosphere. Emma's thoughts drifted to her grandmother, who she was so excited to see. My grandma is the best, she said, breaking the silence. She always makes the yummiest cookies and tells the funniest stories. I can't wait to see her. Mr. Jenkins' eyes softened. Grandmothers have a special way of making us feel loved and cherished. I'm sure she's just as excited to see you. Emma nodded eagerly. She's been telling me about a new garden she planted. I can't wait to help her take care of it. I'm sure you'll do a wonderful job, Mr. Jenkins said warmly. Gardening is a lovely way to connect with nature and find peace. The train began to slow as it approached a small station, a reminder that their time together was drawing to a close. Emma felt a pang of sadness at the thought of saying goodbye to Mr. Jenkins. She had grown so fond of him in such a short time. As they prepared to disembark, Mr. Jenkins reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden box. He handed it to Emma with a gentle smile. Here, Emma. I want you to have this. It's a keepsake from my teaching days. Inside are some of my favorite quotes and little trinkets I collected over the years. They always brought me comfort and inspiration. I hope they do the same for you. Emma accepted the box, her eyes wide with gratitude. Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. I'll treasure it always. They stepped off the train together, the platform bustling with activity. Emma's grandmother was waiting, her face lighting up as she saw Emma. She rushed over and enveloped her in a warm hug. "Emma, my dear! I've missed you so much," her grandmother exclaimed, her eyes shining with joy. "I missed you too, Grandma," Emma replied, her voice muffled by the embrace. Mr. Jenkins stood by, smiling at the reunion. Emma turned to him, her eyes full of emotion. "Promise me you'll take care, Mr. Jenkins. And I hope you have a wonderful time with your brother." "I promise," Mr. Jenkins said softly. "Thank you, Emma, for your kindness and company. You've brightened my day more than you know." With a final wave, Mr. Jenkins turned and made his way through the crowd, disappearing into the hustle and bustle of the station. Emma watched him go, her heart full of a bittersweet mix of sadness and joy. She knew their paths had crossed for a reason, and she would cherish the memory of this journey forever. As she walked hand in hand with her grandmother towards the exit, Emma clutched the wooden box tightly, feeling a sense of connection to Mr. Jenkins and the wisdom he had shared. The journey had been more than just a train ride. It had been a lesson in kindness, resilience, and the unexpected ways in which people can touch each other's lives. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden glow over the quaint town as Emma and her grandmother walked through the garden gate. The air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming flowers and the soft rustling of leaves. Emma's heart was light, buoyed by the memories of the train ride and the kindness she had shared with Mr. Jenkins. She couldn't wait to tell her grandmother all about it. "Grandma, you won't believe the adventure I had on the train," Emma exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Her grandmother smiled, her face crinkling into 100 lines of affection. "Oh, I can't wait to hear all about it, sweetheart. But first, let's get you settled and have some dinner. I made your favorite, macaroni and cheese." Emma's stomach growled in anticipation. "That sounds perfect, Grandma." "Thank you." Inside the cozy house, the kitchen was filled with the comforting aroma of home-cooked food. Emma helped set the table, chattering about her school, her friends, and the anticipation of spending time in the garden. As they sat down to eat, Emma began to recount her encounter with Mr. Jenkins. "And then, Grandma, I saw this old man who couldn't pay for his ticket," she said between bites. "So, I used my allowance to buy it for him. His name was Mr. Jenkins, and he was so nice. We talked the whole way here." Her grandmother listened intently, her eyes shining with pride. "That was a very kind thing to do, Emma. I'm sure Mr. Jenkins appreciated your help more than you know." Emma nodded. "He gave me this old coin and a little wooden box with quotes and trinkets. He said they always brought him comfort and inspiration." Her grandmother's face softened with a tender smile. "What a wonderful gift. It sounds like you made a new friend." After dinner, they retired to the living room, where Emma's grandmother pulled out an old photo album. They spent hours flipping through the pages, Emma asking questions about each picture, her grandmother providing stories and memories. "This is your grandpa and me on our wedding day," her grandmother said, pointing to a black and white photo of a young couple beaming at the camera. "You both look so happy," Emma observed, leaning closer to examine the details. "I wish I could have met him." "He would have loved you dearly," her grandmother replied, a wistful note in her voice. "He had a heart as big as yours." As the night wore on, Emma grew sleepy, her eyelids drooping despite her best efforts to stay awake. Her grandmother tucked her into bed, brushing a kiss across her forehead. "Good night, my sweet girl." "Sleep well," she whispered. "Good night, Grandma," Emma murmured, already drifting off to sleep. The next morning, Emma awoke to the sound of birds chirping and the sun streaming through the curtains. She stretched and yawned, feeling refreshed and excited for the day ahead. She quickly dressed and ran downstairs, eager to start her day with her grandmother. "Good morning, sunshine," her grandmother greeted her with a smile. "I thought we could spend the morning in the garden, if you'd like." "Yes, please," Emma replied enthusiastically. "I can't wait to see the new plants you've been telling me about." They spent the morning in the garden, weeding, watering, and planting new flowers. Emma loved the feel of the soil between her fingers and the satisfaction of seeing the garden bloom under their care. Her grandmother's garden was a riot of colors, with flowers of every hue and variety. As they worked, Emma told her grandmother more about Mr. Jenkins. He said he used to be a teacher, but he had to stop because he got sick and had a lot of medical bills. Her grandmother paused, wiping her hands on her apron. That must have been very hard for him. It sounds like he's been through a lot. Emma nodded, her expression serious. But he was still so nice and happy. He said meeting kind people reminded him that there's still goodness in the world. Her grandmother smiled, her eyes filled with warmth. He's right, you know. Kindness can make all the difference in someone's life. Just like you did for Mr. Jenkins. They continued to work in the garden, the sun climbing higher in the sky. The morning passed quickly, filled with laughter, stories, and the simple joy of being together. By the time they finished, the garden was even more beautiful, a testament to their hard work and care. As they sat on the porch, enjoying a cool glass of lemonade, Emma's grandmother turned to her with a thoughtful expression. Emma, you know, sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can ripple out and touch many lives. You did something very special for Mr. Jenkins, and I'm sure it will stay with him for a long time. Emma smiled, feeling a warm glow of happiness. I hope so, Grandma. I really liked talking to him. He made me feel like I was making a difference. You were, my dear. And you are, her grandmother said, hugging her close. The rest of the day was spent in a whirl of activities, baking cookies, playing games, and exploring the town. Everywhere they went, Emma carried the wooden box Mr. Jenkins had given her, feeling the connection to him and the wisdom it contained. That evening, as they sat together watching the sunset, Emma's grandmother turned to her with a gentle smile. You know, Emma, life has a way of bringing people together at just the right moment. Meeting Mr. Jenkins was no accident. You both needed each other, even if it was just for a short time. Emma nodded, understanding what her grandmother meant. I think you're right, Grandma. I'm glad I met him. As the sky darkened and the stars began to twinkle, Emma felt a deep sense of contentment. She knew that her act of kindness had made a difference, not just for Mr. Jenkins, but for herself as well. It had opened her heart to the beauty of giving and the power of connection. The next morning, Emma and her grandmother packed a picnic and set off for a nearby park. The day was warm and bright, the perfect backdrop for their outing. They found a shady spot under a large oak tree and spread out their blanket. As they enjoyed their lunch, Emma's grandmother brought out a small package. I have something for you, Emma. I thought you might like it. Emma's eyes lit up with curiosity. She carefully unwrapped the package to reveal a beautifully bound journal. It's for you to write down your thoughts, stories, and memories. Just like the ones you've shared with me. Emma hugged her grandmother tightly. Thank you, Grandma. I love it. That evening, as Emma sat by the window, she opened the journal and began to write. She wrote about her adventure with Mr. Jenkins, the lessons she had learned, and the feelings it had stirred in her heart. As she wrote, she felt a sense of peace and purpose, knowing that her kindness had made a difference. And as the stars shone brightly in the night sky, Emma knew that this was just the beginning of many more acts of kindness and adventures to come. The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains, casting delicate patterns of light across Emma's room. She stretched and yawned, feeling the excitement of another day with her grandmother. As she dressed, the memory of her journey with Mr. Jenkins filled her mind, bringing a smile to her face. Little did she know, today would bring an unexpected surprise. Emma bounded down the stairs, eager to start the day. Her grandmother was already in the kitchen, preparing a hearty breakfast. The aroma of pancakes and bacon filled the air, making Emma's stomach growl. Good morning, Grandma, Emma said cheerfully, giving her a big hug. Good morning, sweetheart, her grandmother replied, returning the hug. I have a feeling today is going to be a special day. Emma's eyes sparkled with curiosity. Why do you say that? Her grandmother just smiled mysteriously. Sometimes, you just have to trust that good things are on their way. After breakfast, they decided to take a walk to the local farmers market. The town was bustling with activity, the market stalls brimming with fresh produce, handmade crafts, and vibrant flowers. Emma loved the lively atmosphere, the friendly faces, and the chance to discover something new. As they strolled through the market, Emma's attention was caught by a stall selling beautiful, hand-painted postcards. Each card depicted a different scene from the town, capturing its charm and beauty. "Look, Grandma! These are so pretty," Emma exclaimed, picking up a card with a picture of the old train station. Her grandmother smiled. "Why don't you pick out a few? They'll be nice keepsakes to remember your visit." Emma carefully selected a few postcards, each one holding a special significance. As she paid for them, she couldn't help but think of Mr. Jenkins and the stories they had shared. She decided she would write to him and send one of the postcards as a thank you. They continued their walk, enjoying the sights and sounds of the market. Emma's grandmother chatted with the vendors, exchanging pleasantries and catching up on local news. Emma loved how everyone seemed to know each other, the sense of community making her feel right at home. As they were about to leave, Emma's grandmother spotted a familiar face in the crowd. "Isn't that Mr. Thompson, the postman?" she said, pointing towards an elderly man with a kind smile. Emma nodded, remembering the stories her grandmother had told her about Mr. Thompson. "Yes, it is. He's always so nice when he delivers the mail." They approached Mr. Thompson, who greeted them warmly. "Good morning, ladies. It's a beautiful day, isn't it?" "It certainly is," Emma's grandmother replied. "How have you been, Mr. Thompson?" "Oh, keeping busy as always," he said with a chuckle. "Speaking of which, I have something for you, Emma." Emma looked up in surprise. "For me?" Mr. Thompson reached into his bag and pulled out a small envelope. "This arrived at the post office this morning. It's addressed to you." Emma took the envelope, her heart pounding with excitement. The handwriting was neat and familiar. She quickly opened it and began to read. "Dear Emma, I hope this letter finds you well and happy. I wanted to thank you once again for your kindness on the train. It meant more to me than words can express. I have something special I would like to share with you. If you're available, please meet me at the old train station tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. With gratitude, Mr. Jenkins." Emma's eyes widened in surprise and curiosity. "Grandma, it's from Mr. Jenkins. He wants to meet me at the train station tomorrow." Her grandmother's eyes twinkled with intrigue. "Well, it sounds like we have plans for tomorrow, then." The next morning, Emma could hardly contain her excitement. They arrived at the train station a little before 10 a.m., the place where her journey with Mr. Jenkins had begun. As they waited, Emma clutched the small wooden box he had given her, feeling its comforting weight in her hands. A few minutes later, a sleek, luxurious car pulled up to the station. Emma's eyes widened as a well-dressed man stepped out and approached them. "Good morning," he said with a warm smile. "Are you Emma?" "Yes, that's me," Emma replied, her curiosity growing. "My name is Mr. Collins," the man said. "I'm Mr. Jenkins' assistant. He asked me to bring you to him. Please, follow me." Emma exchanged a surprised look with her grandmother, who nodded encouragingly. They followed Mr. Collins to the car, where he held the door open for them. As they settled into the plush seats, Emma's mind raced with questions. The car wound its way through the town and into the countryside, eventually pulling up to a grand estate surrounded by lush gardens. Emma's mouth dropped open in amazement. The mansion was beautiful, with ivy-covered walls and towering oak trees lining the driveway. Mr. Collins led them inside, where they were greeted by the warm, welcoming aroma of freshly baked bread and flowers. As they entered the drawing room, Mr. Jenkins stood to greet them, his eyes twinkling with joy. "Emma, it's so wonderful to see you again," he said, embracing her gently. Emma hugged him back, her heart full. "It's great to see you too, Mr. Jenkins. I didn't expect all this." Mr. Jenkins smiled warmly. You gave me a great gift, Emma. It's only right that I share my gratitude with you. Please, make yourselves at home. They spent the day exploring the estate, from the grand library filled with countless books to the expansive gardens that seemed to stretch on forever. Mr. Jenkins shared stories of the estate, its history, and the many people who had visited over the years. As they walked through the gardens, Emma felt a deep sense of connection and joy. This place is amazing, Mr. Jenkins. Thank you for inviting us. Mr. Jenkins' eyes softened. It's my pleasure, Emma. You reminded me of the importance of kindness and generosity. This estate was left to me by a dear friend who believed in giving back to the community. I've tried to continue that legacy, and meeting you is a wonderful reminder of why it's so important. Later, they gathered for a lavish meal, filled with laughter and heartfelt conversation. Mr. Jenkins shared more about his life, his struggles, and the people who had helped him along the way. Emma's grandmother shared stories of their family, and Emma spoke of her dreams and aspirations. As the day drew to a close, Mr. Jenkins took Emma aside. Emma, I want to do something special for you and your family. Your kindness has touched my heart, and I'd like to help ensure you have the opportunities to follow your dreams. He handed her an envelope. Inside was a letter detailing a scholarship fund he had set up in her name, dedicated to helping kind-hearted children pursue their education. Emma's eyes filled with tears of gratitude. Thank you, Mr. Jenkins, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. This means so much to me. Mr. Jenkins smiled, his eyes shining. You deserve it, Emma. Never forget the power of kindness and the impact it can have on the world. As they left the estate that evening, Emma felt a profound sense of fulfillment and hope. The surprise meeting with Mr. Jenkins had not only deepened her understanding of kindness but also opened new doors for her future. She knew that this was just the beginning of many more acts of kindness and connections to come. The ride back from Mr. Jenkins' estate was filled with a sense of wonder and anticipation. Emma clutched the envelope containing the details of her scholarship, her heart brimming with gratitude and excitement. She looked out the window, the countryside bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun, feeling as if she were living in a dream. When they arrived back at her grandmother's house, the evening air was cool and filled with the sounds of crickets and the distant hoot of an owl. They settled into the cozy living room, the warmth of the day's events still enveloping them. Emma's grandmother turned to her, her eyes shining with pride. I'm so proud of you, Emma. Your kindness has led to something truly remarkable. Emma smiled, her heart full. Thank you, Grandma. I feel like everything has changed, and it all started with just a small act of kindness. Her grandmother nodded, her expression thoughtful. It's amazing how one small gesture can ripple out and touch so many lives. You've inspired me, Emma. The days that followed were filled with a sense of purpose. Emma and her grandmother returned to their routine, but there was a new energy in everything they did. Emma wrote a letter to Mr. Jenkins, thanking him again and sharing her dreams for the future. She carefully chose one of the hand-painted postcards she had bought at the market to include with the letter, knowing it would remind him of their special connection. One sunny afternoon, a few weeks later, Emma was playing in the garden when her grandmother called out to her. Emma, there's someone here to see you. Emma hurried to the front of the house, her curiosity piqued. There, standing on the porch, was Mr. Collins, Mr. Jenkins' assistant. He held a large, beautifully wrapped box in his hands. Hello, Emma, Mr. Collins said with a warm smile. Mr. Jenkins wanted you to have this. Emma's eyes widened with surprise and excitement. For me? Mr. Collins nodded, handing her the box. Yes, it's a special gift from Mr. Jenkins. He wanted to thank you for your kindness and to encourage you to keep pursuing your dreams. Emma carefully unwrapped the box, revealing a stunning wooden chest. She opened it to find a collection of beautifully bound books, each one filled with stories of adventure, kindness, and courage. On top of the books was a letter from Mr. Jenkins. Dear Emma, these books are some of my favorites, and I wanted you to have them. They've inspired me throughout my life, and I hope they do the same for you. Remember, the world is full of possibilities, and your kindness can help shape a brighter future for everyone you meet. With gratitude and best wishes, Mr. Jenkins." Tears welled up in Emma's eyes as she read the letter. She looked up at Mr. Collins, her voice filled with emotion. "Thank you so much. Please tell Mr. Jenkins how grateful I am." Mr. Collins smiled warmly. "I will, Emma. And I know he'll be thrilled to hear it." As Emma's grandmother thanked Mr. Collins and saw him off, Emma sat on the porch steps, running her fingers over the spines of the books. Each title promised a new adventure, a new lesson, and she couldn't wait to dive into them. That evening, as the sun set in a blaze of colors, Emma and her grandmother sat together on the porch, enjoying the cool breeze and the sounds of the night. Emma held one of the books in her lap, feeling a deep sense of peace and purpose. "Grandma," Emma said softly, "I want to be like Mr. Jenkins when I grow up. I want to help people and make the world a better place." Her grandmother smiled, her eyes shining with love and pride. "I have no doubt that you will, Emma. You have a heart full of kindness and a spirit full of courage. You can achieve anything you set your mind to." As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Emma felt a sense of excitement and anticipation for the future. She knew that her journey was just beginning and that there were many more adventures and acts of kindness ahead. The next morning, Emma decided to start a new project. Inspired by Mr. Jenkins' generosity, she wanted to create a community garden where people could come together, share their stories, and grow food and flowers. She shared her idea with her grandmother, who was immediately supportive. "That's a wonderful idea, Emma," her grandmother said. "I'll help you in any way I can. Let's start by talking to our neighbors and seeing who would like to be involved." They spent the next few weeks planning and organizing, talking to neighbors, and gathering supplies. Emma was thrilled by the positive response from the community. People of all ages came forward to offer their help, and soon, they had a dedicated group of volunteers ready to bring the garden to life. On the day of the garden's grand opening, the air was filled with excitement and anticipation. Emma stood at the entrance, greeting everyone with a warm smile. Her grandmother stood beside her, beaming with pride. The garden was a beautiful sight, filled with vibrant flowers, lush vegetable plants, and inviting benches where people could sit and enjoy the beauty around them. As the community members gathered, Emma felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had turned her dream into reality, and it was all thanks to the kindness and generosity she had experienced. As the festivities began, Emma's grandmother took her aside. "Emma, I want you to have this," she said, handing her a small, beautifully wrapped package. Emma unwrapped it to find a delicate silver necklace with a heart-shaped pendant. Inside the pendant was a tiny, intricately designed key. "This key represents the key to your heart," her grandmother explained. "It's a reminder that your kindness and love can unlock so much good in the world." Emma hugged her grandmother tightly, tears of joy in her eyes. "Thank you, Grandma. I'll treasure it always." As the sun set on the garden, casting a warm glow over the celebration, Emma looked around at the smiling faces of her friends, family, and neighbors. She knew that this was just the beginning of many more acts of kindness and community projects. The world was full of possibilities, and she was ready to embrace them all. And so, with a heart full of gratitude and a spirit full of hope, Emma embarked on her journey, knowing that she could make a difference. The future was bright, and the world was a place where kindness and generosity could create endless ripples of joy and connection.